The dust-laden wind carried the scent of impending rain as Winifred Barnes stood on the weathered porch of her father's mercantile, her fingers tightening around the telegram that had arrived that morning. Montana Territory, 1876, a land of opportunity and broken promises. She'd just received confirmation of her fate, a marriage arranged by her father to a wealthy cattle baron she'd never met, a man 3 decades her senior with a reputation that made her stomach turn. "Pa says it's the only way," she whispered to herself, watching a lone rider approach from the western edge of town, his silhouette dark against the setting sun. Jackson Moore dismounted his chestnut mare with the easy grace of a man who'd spent more time in the saddle than on solid ground. His worn leather vest and sun-faded shirt spoke of hard work and harder travels. At 32, he'd built his reputation as one of the most reliable cattle drivers in the territory, honest, fair, and uncompromising. Jackson tied his horse to the hitching post and noticed the young woman on the porch, her copper hair catching the last rays of sunlight. He tipped his hat out of courtesy, offering a brief smile before making his way toward the mercantile entrance. "We're closed," Winifred said, her voice carrying a note of frustration that had nothing to do with the stranger before her. Jackson paused, one boot on the first step. "Apologies, madam. I just rode in from the Yellowstone, been driving cattle for 2 weeks straight. I was hoping to get some supplies before settling in for the night." Winifred studied the cowboy, noting the deep lines etched around his eyes not from age but from squinting against the harsh prairie sun. His jawline was covered with several days' worth of stubble, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her look away. "I suppose I could make an exception," she finally said, moving toward the door. "My father's away on business and I was just about to close up, but I can help you with the essentials." Jackson nodded gratefully and followed her inside. The store was well stocked, shelves lined with everything from canned goods to tools, fabric to ammunition. Winifred moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency while Jackson gathered what he needed. "You planning to stay in town long?" she asked, making conversation as she tallied his purchases. "No, madam, just passing through. Got a meeting with Harold Jenkins tomorrow about buying his ranch." "Then I'll be heading back out." Winifred's hand froze over the ledger. "Jenkins Ranch, you're looking to buy the Jenkins place?" Jackson noted her reaction with interest. "Yes, madam. Been saving for years to have a spread of my own. Time to stop driving other men's cattle and start raising my own." "The Jenkins Ranch isn't for sale anymore," she said quietly, returning to her calculations with renewed focus. "Pardon me, but I received word from Jenkins himself not 2 weeks ago that he was willing to sell. We agreed on a price through correspondence." Winifred sighed, placing both hands flat on the counter. "Well, Mr. Moore, Jackson Moore, Mr. Moore, I'm afraid things have changed. My father, Thomas Barnes, has arranged to purchase the Jenkins Ranch as part of a business arrangement." Jackson's brow furrowed. "What kind of arrangement would supersede a deal already in progress?" Winifred's cheeks flushed with anger and embarrassment. "The kind that involves a daughter," she said bitterly. "The ranch is to be part of my dowry when I marry Edgar Thornton next month." Recognition dawned in Jackson's eyes. Thornton was one of the territory's wealthiest men, controlling vast swaths of land and cattle. He was also known for his ruthless business practices and his penchant for young wives, having buried 2 already. "I see," Jackson said carefully. "And how do you feel about this arrangement, Miss Barnes?" "My feelings aren't relevant, Mr. Moore. It's already arranged." She slid his purchases across the counter with more force than necessary. Jackson placed his payment beside the goods, his eyes never leaving her face. "Then let me undo it with a better offer." Winifred looked up sharply, surprise evident in her expression. "Excuse me, the ranch. I'll pay more than your father's offering." Jenkins and I shook hands, albeit through telegraph. "Where I come from, that still means something. You don't understand, this isn't just about the ranch." Winifred lowered her voice, though they were alone in the store. "My father owes Thornton money, a lot of money. This marriage clears the debt and secures our future." Jackson leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful, And what of your future, Miss Barnes? Does becoming the third Mrs. Thornton appeal to you? That's hardly appropriate conversation, Mr. Moore, she replied stiffly, though her eyes betrayed her distress. Maybe not, he agreed, gathering his supplies, but I'll be seeing Jenkins tomorrow regardless. If there's still a chance to honor our agreement, I intend to take it. Winifred watched as he packed the items into his saddlebags. It won't change anything, not the parts that matter. Jackson paused at the door. Miss Barnes, in my experience, it's the parts that matter most that are always worth fighting for. With that, he tipped his hat and stepped back into the fading daylight. Winifred remained at the counter long after he'd gone, the echo of his words settling into the silence of the empty store. She glanced down at the telegram, still clutched in her hand her father's instructions to prepare for the wedding. In 6 weeks' time, she would be Mrs. Edgar Thornton, mistress of the largest cattle empire in the territory and wife to a man she'd met exactly once, at a social gathering where he'd spent more time appraising her figure than conversing with her. The bell above the door jingled, startling her from her thoughts. Her younger brother William rushed in, his 16-year-old face flushed with excitement. Win, you'll never believe who just rode into town. Jackson Moore himself. They say he's driven more cattle across the territory than any man alive. Yes, I just met him, she replied, trying to keep her voice even. William's eyes widened. You did? What's he like? They say he once fought off 3 rustlers with nothing but a hunting knife and pure grit. Winifred couldn't help but smile at her brother's enthusiasm. He seemed principled. He's staying at the hotel. Maybe I could introduce myself, ask him about his adventures. William, don't pester the man. I'm sure he's tired from his journey. Her brother looked disappointed but nodded. Fine. Oh, I almost forgot why I came, Mrs. Hudson sent over the fabric samples for your wedding dress. They're on the kitchen table. The reminder of her impending marriage dampened Winifred's mood instantly. Thank you, William. Would you mind closing up the store? I need some air. Without waiting for his response, she grabbed her shawl and stepped outside. The evening had settled fully now, stars emerging in the vast Montana sky. Winifred walked briskly toward the edge of town, away from curious eyes and well-meaning neighbors eager to discuss her upcoming nuptials. She found herself at the small creek that ran along the eastern edge of Coulter's Creek, the settlement her father had helped establish 15 years ago when they'd moved west after her mother's death. The rushing water provided a soothing background to her troubled thoughts. You shouldn't be out alone after dark. Winifred whirled around to find Jackson Moore standing a few paces away, his silhouette illuminated by the rising moon. Are you following me, Mr. Moore? She demanded, heart racing from the surprise. Not at all. I was walking off the trail dust before turning in, found this spot by chance. He gestured to the creek. Though I'm glad I happened upon you, these parts aren't always safe for a lady alone. I've lived here most of my life, Mr. Moore. I know Coulter's Creek better than most. Jackson nodded, acknowledging her point. Still, won't your fiancé worry? Winifred laughed bitterly. Edgar Thornton is 60 miles away at his ranch, probably reviewing his assets or intimidating his foreman. I doubt my evening constitutional concerns him. Yet he's willing to marry you. He's willing to acquire me, along with my father's business connections and the Jenkins ranch. She kicked a stone into the water, watching the ripples spread. A convenient package. Jackson moved closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. Forgive my bluntness, Miss Barnes, but why agree to such an arrangement? Surely a woman like you has other options. A woman like me, she echoed, her tone challenging, intelligent, strong-willed, clearly capable of running a business. He gestured back toward the mercantile. Not to mention. He trailed off, seemingly thinking better of completing the thought. Not to mention what, Mr. Moore? Not to mention uncommonly beautiful, he finished quietly. Thornton may be wealthy, but he's a hard man with a harder reputation. You deserve better. Winifred felt heat rise to her cheeks, grateful for the darkness that hid her reaction. My father's debts don't leave room for what I deserve. After the drought last year and the bank calling in his loans, this arrangement was his salvation. I couldn't refuse. There's always another way, Jackson insisted. Is there? Would you have me leave my family destitute, watch my father lose everything he's built, see my brother's future opportunities vanish? She shook her head. No, Mr. Moore, sometimes we make sacrifices for those we love. Jackson fell silent, studying the determined set of her jaw in the moonlight. What if I could offer an alternative, a way to save your father's business without sacrificing your future? Winifred looked at him skeptically. And how would you manage that? Are you secretly a wealthy banker in disguise? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. No disguise necessary. I've been driving cattle and saving every penny for 10 years. The Jenkins Ranch was to be my start, but I have other funds. If your father's debt is the issue, perhaps I could help. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Jackson took a deep breath, as if considering his words carefully. Let's just say I recognize something in you that reminds me why I came west in the first place. Freedom, determination, the chance to forge your own path. Winifred stared at him, trying to discern his true intentions. Mr. Moore, if you're suggesting, I'm suggesting nothing improper, he interrupted. Only that before you resign yourself to a loveless marriage, you consider that there might be other solutions. Talk to your father when he returns. Tell him of my interest in helping. And what would you want in return? She asked suspiciously. The chance to purchase the Jenkins Ranch as originally planned, and, he hesitated, the opportunity to get to know you better should you be amenable. Before Winifred could respond, voices called her name from the direction of town. William appeared at the edge of the trees, lantern in hand. Win, pause back early, he's looking for you. Winifred glanced anxiously at Jackson. I have to go. Think about what I said, he urged quietly. Meet me tomorrow at noon, behind the livery stable. I'll have spoken to Jenkins by then. She hesitated only a moment before nodding and hurrying toward her brother. As she reached William, she glanced back, but Jackson had already disappeared into the shadows. Thomas Barnes was a formidable presence despite his average height. What he lacked in stature, he made up for with a booming voice and unwavering confidence that had served him well as both a businessman and the unofficial mayor of Coulter's Creek. There you are, he exclaimed as Winifred entered their home above the Mercantile. Out gallivanting at this hour, with the wedding approaching, you need to be more mindful of appearances. I was just getting some air, Pa, she explained, hanging her shawl on the hook by the door. Well, I have excellent news. Edgar has moved up the wedding date. He'll be arriving in 3 days and you'll be married by week's end. Winifred felt the blood drain from her face. But that's too soon. We agreed on 6 weeks to prepare. Thomas waved off her concern. Edgar's eager to settle the matter, and frankly, so am I. The bank's been pressing me about the loan payments. Once you're married, all that unpleasantness will be behind us. Pa, about the Jenkins Ranch, already settled, Thomas beamed, pouring himself a whiskey from the sideboard. Sign the papers today. It's officially part of your dowry, which pleased Edgar immensely. But there was another buyer, Winifred protested. Jackson Moore had an agreement with Jenkins. Thomas's expression darkened. Moore, the cattle driver, what do you know of him? He came into the store today. He said he and Jenkins had already agreed on a price. Well, money talks louder than words, and Thornton's money practically shouts. Jenkins was happy to take our offer. Our offer or Thornton's threat? Winifred challenged, familiar with Edgar's business methods. Mind your tongue, girl, Thomas warned. Edgar Thornton is going to be your husband, and you do well to remember that he's saving this family from ruin. By purchasing me along with a piece of land, she retorted bitterly. Thomas slammed his glass down. Enough. I didn't raise you to be ungrateful. Do you think your mother would want to see her only daughter turn her nose up at security and wealth, at the chance to save her family's legacy? The mention of her mother silenced Winifred immediately. She'd been only 10 when Sarah Barnes had succumbed to pneumonia during their journey west. The memory of her mother's gentle wisdom and unwavering support had been Winifred's guiding light through the years. No, Pa, she said quietly. She wouldn't want that. Thomas's expression softened. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become, Win. She'd understand that sometimes life requires difficult choices. Edgar may not be the husband of your dreams, but he'll provide for you and ensure this family's future. Winifred nodded, though her heart rebelled against every word. If you'll excuse me, I'm tired from the day." In her small bedroom, Winifred sat by the window, staring out at the stars. Her thoughts kept returning to Jackson Moore and his strange offer. There had been something in his eyes, a sincerity that contrasted sharply with Edgar Thornton's calculating gaze. Morning came too quickly. Winifred went through her routine mechanically, opening the store and serving customers while her mind raced with possibilities and fears. As noon approached, she made her decision. "William, can you watch the store for an hour?" she asked her brother. "I need to run an errand." William looked up from the inventory list he was checking. "Sure, Win, is everything all right? You seem distracted." "Just wedding preparations," she lied, forcing a smile. "I won't be long." The livery stable sat at the far end of Main Street, adjacent to the blacksmith's forge. Winifred approached cautiously, checking to ensure she wasn't observed before slipping around to the back. Jackson was waiting, leaning against the rough wooden wall, his hat pulled low. He straightened when he saw her. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I wasn't sure you would." "I shouldn't be here," Winifred admitted. "My father returned last night. The wedding has been moved up." "I'm to marry Edgar Thornton in 4 days." Jackson's expression hardened. "And the Jenkins Ranch, already purchased as part of my dowry. I'm sorry, Mr. Moore." He kicked at the dirt, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I spoke with Jenkins this morning. He admitted he had a verbal agreement with me, but said Thornton made it clear there would be consequences if he didn't sell to your father instead." "That sounds like Edgar," Winifred said grimly. "He's not accustomed to being denied. Neither am I, Miss Barnes." Jackson stepped closer, his voice lowering. "I meant what I said last night. I can help with your father's debts. I have the funds." Winifred shook her head. "It's more complicated than that. The debts are significant, and Edgar holds the notes now. He purchased them from the bank months ago, apparently with this arrangement in mind. So he orchestrated this entire situation," Jackson said, understanding dawning, "created the circumstances that would force your father's hand." "And mine," Winifred added bitterly. Jackson began pacing, his mind clearly working through possibilities. "What if we could prove his manipulation? Surely your father wouldn't want you married to a man who deliberately engineered your family's financial troubles. My father sees Edgar as our salvation. He wouldn't believe it even with proof. Then we need another solution." Jackson stopped pacing and faced her directly. "Run away with me." Winifred stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What? Come with me. Today, now, I have friends in Wyoming territory who would help us. We could start fresh, away from Thornton's influence." "You're mad," she whispered, though a part of her thrilled at the suggestion. "I can't abandon my family. You can send for them once we're established. Your brother is nearly grown, he could join us. And my father, the store. Everything he's built." Jackson's expression softened. "Sometimes we have to lose what we have to gain what we deserve." Winifred backed away, shaking her head. "I barely know you, Mr. Moore. For all I know, you could be worse than Edgar Thornton." "Fair point," he conceded. "But ask yourself this, do you truly believe that?" She didn't answer immediately, searching his face for any sign of deception. There was not only earnest determination and something else, something that made her heart beat faster. "No," she finally admitted. "I don't believe that. But I still can't leave, not like this." Jackson nodded, respecting her decision even as disappointment shadowed his features. "Then we need a plan that keeps you here but free of Thornton. Give me time to think." "Time is the one thing I don't have," she reminded him. "Meet me tonight, same place by the creek. I'll have something by then." Winifred hesitated, aware that she was playing a dangerous game. "I'll try, but I can't promise. Pa will be watching me closely now." "I'll wait until midnight," Jackson assured her. "And Winifred." He used her name for the first time, the sound of it in his deep voice sending an unexpected shiver through her. "Don't give up hope." With those words, he disappeared around the corner of the stable, leaving Winifred with a tumultuous mix of fear and something dangerously close to hope. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Thomas Barnes had invited half the town to dinner to announce the accelerated wedding plans, and Winifred found herself trapped in a whirlwind of congratulations and well wishes that felt more like condolences. You'll be the envy of every girl in the territory, Mrs. Hudson gushed, the seamstress already taking measurements for a hastily constructed wedding gown. Edgar Thornton, why his house is practically a palace, with all the warmth of a mausoleum, Winifred muttered under her breath. What was that, dear? I said I'm overwhelmed with happiness, she lied, forcing a smile. By evening, their home was filled with neighbors and friends, all celebrating what they perceived as Winifred's good fortune. She moved among them like a ghost, smiling when appropriate, thanking well-wishers, all while watching the clock tick inexorably toward midnight. You seem distracted, sister, William observed, cornering her in the kitchen as she replenished a tray of refreshments. Are you truly happy with this match? Winifred looked at her brother, seeing the concern in his young face. William had always been perceptive, too observant for his own good. It doesn't matter if I'm happy, she said quietly. It's what's best for our family. William frowned. That's not what Ma would say. She always told us that happiness was the true measure of wealth. Tears stung Winifred's eyes at the reminder. Sometimes we have to create our own happiness within the circumstances we're given, or change the circumstances, William suggested. I'm not blind, Win. I see how Pa struggles with the business, but selling you to Thornton isn't the answer. He's not selling me, she protested weakly. William gave her a knowing look. Isn't he? Thornton gets you, the Jenkins ranch, and Pa's business connections. What do you get besides a husband old enough to be your grandfather? Security, stability. A gilded cage is still a cage, William countered. I saw you talking to Jackson Moore earlier. Behind the livery, Winifred tensed. You followed me. I was delivering a package to the blacksmith. Don't worry, I didn't tell Pa. He leaned closer. Moore's a good man from what I hear. Honest, fair, treats his men well. William, don't. I'm just saying if you were considering alternatives, you could do worse. He squeezed her arm, and I'd support you no matter what. Before Winifred could respond, their father's booming voice called from the parlor. Winifred, bring those refreshments. Judge Patterson is ready to make a toast. The party dragged on until well past 11. By the time the last guest departed and her father retired to his room, it was approaching midnight. Winifred waited until the house fell silent before carefully opening her bedroom window and climbing down the trellis that adorned the side of the building, a skill she'd perfected in her younger years. The night air was cool against her skin as she hurried toward the creek, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. What was she doing? Meeting a virtual stranger in the middle of the night, considering abandoning her family and responsibilities. It was madness. Yet something about Jackson Moore called to her, awakening a part of herself she'd long suppressed in favor of duty and pragmatism. The creek was bathed in moonlight when she arrived, the water glittering like liquid silver. For a moment, she thought she was alone, that Jackson had given up waiting. Then a shadow detached itself from the trees and he stepped into the clearing. You came, he said, echoing his words from earlier, but this time with a warmth that wrapped around her like an embrace. I shouldn't have, she admitted, if my father knew. But you did, Jackson moved closer, stopping just short of touching her, because you know there's another way. Is there? Have you devised this miraculous plan that saves everyone? Jackson's expression turned serious. Not everyone. Some people deserve what's coming to them. What do you mean? He gestured for her to sit on a fallen log, taking a place beside her. I've been asking questions around town. Your father isn't the only one Thornton has maneuvered into debt. He's been systematically buying up notes and pressuring landowners throughout the territory. That's hardly surprising, Winifred said. Edgar's always expanding his holdings. Yes, but the pattern is specific. He's targeting properties along the proposed railroad route. Winifred's eyes widened. The Northern Pacific Extension, but that's just a rumor. Not according to Judge Patterson, who let slip after a few whiskeys that the territorial governor has already approved the plans. The announcement will come next month, and land values along the route will triple overnight. And the Jenkins Ranch sits right where the station would be built, Winifred realized. That's why Edgar wanted it included in the dowry. Jackson nodded. Exactly. He's been planning this for months, positioning himself to control the most valuable parcels when the news breaks. So he doesn't want me at all, Winifred said, unsure whether to feel relieved or insulted. Just the land and connections I bring. I wouldn't say that, Jackson's voice hardened. Thornton's reputation with women is well known, but yes, this marriage is primarily a business arrangement for him. How does this help us? If anything, it makes Edgar more determined to go through with the wedding, because information is power, Jackson explained. The railroad negotiations were conducted in secret to prevent speculation. The governor would be extremely displeased to learn that someone like Thornton had advanced knowledge and was using it for personal gain. Understanding dawned on Winifred. You're suggesting blackmail. I prefer to think of it as negotiation, Jackson corrected with a slight smile. We offer Thornton a choice: release your father from his debts and relinquish his claim to the Jenkins Ranch, or face exposure of his railroad scheme. He's a powerful man, Jackson. He could make things very difficult for us. He could try, Jackson acknowledged. But even powerful men have vulnerabilities, and I'm not without resources and friends of my own. Winifred studied his face in the moonlight, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She found not only determination and something deeper, a tenderness when he looked at her that made her breath catch. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "The Jenkins Ranch can't be worth all this trouble." Jackson reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "Maybe I'm not just fighting for the ranch anymore." The simple touch sent warmth spiraling through Winifred's body. For a moment, they sat in silence, the night sounds of the creek creating a peaceful backdrop to the tumult of emotions between them. "If we do this," she finally said, "we'll need proof of Thornton's knowledge about the railroad." "I'm working on that," Jackson assured her. "There's a clerk at the Territorial Land Office who keeps records of all Thornton's recent acquisitions. If we can show they align perfectly with the proposed route." "That won't be enough," Winifred frowned. "We need something more concrete, a letter, a telegram, something that explicitly connects him to the railroad information." Jackson's expression brightened. "Does your father keep records of his correspondence with Thornton?" "Of course. Pa keeps everything. Business letters, telegrams, contracts, they're all filed in his office behind the store." "Could you access them without raising suspicion?" Winifred nodded. "I help with the bookkeeping." "No one would question me reviewing the files." "Perfect. Look for anything mentioning the railroad, even obliquely. Thornton is too smart to be explicit, but he might have hinted at future developments or anticipated improvements to the area." "I'll search tomorrow morning while Pa is meeting with the banker." Winifred hesitated, a new worry surfacing. "But what if we find nothing? Edgar arrives the day after tomorrow." Jackson's grip on her hand tightened. "Then we move to Plan B." "Which is, I steal you away," he said simply. "My offer stands. We can leave, start fresh elsewhere." "And my family? Would you rather see them temporarily embarrassed or watch you sentenced to a lifetime of unhappiness?" Winifred had no answer for that. The thought of leaving her father and brother filled her with guilt, but the prospect of life with Edgar Thornton was becoming increasingly unbearable. "One step at a time," Jackson suggested gently. "First, we look for evidence. If we find it, we confront Thornton. If not..." He left the sentence unfinished, the alternative hanging between them. "I should get back before I'm missed," Winifred said, reluctantly withdrawing her hand from his. Jackson stood, helping her to her feet. "Tomorrow night, same time?" "Yes," she agreed. "I'll bring whatever I find." As she turned to leave, Jackson called softly after her. "Winifred," she looked back. "Yes, be careful. Thornton has eyes everywhere." With that warning echoing in her mind, Winifred made her way back to the Mercantile, slipping through her bedroom window just as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. Morning brought a flurry of activity to the Barnes household. Thomas was in high spirits, announcing over breakfast that Edgar Thornton himself would be arriving the following day rather than Thursday as previously planned. "He's eager to finalize everything," Thomas explained, buttering his toast with enthusiasm. "Says he has important business in Helena next week and wants to bring his new bride along to meet the governor." Winifred nearly choked on her coffee. The governor? Yes, indeed. You'll be moving in the highest circles, daughter. Edgar and Governor Potts are thick as thieves these days. William caught Winifred's eye across the table, his expression troubled. Isn't the governor involved with that railroad business everyone's talking about? Thomas waved dismissively. Rumors and speculation, though Edgar did mention some exciting developments coming to our region soon. Said land values might see a significant increase. Did he mention when these developments might occur? Winifred asked carefully. No specifics, just that we'd positioned ourselves advantageously by securing the Jenkins property. Thomas stood, collecting his hat. I'm off to meet with Mr. Simmons at the bank. He's preparing to transfer your dowry funds to Edgar's account. Winifred, mind the store today. We've got a shipment of wedding supplies coming on the afternoon stage. Once her father had left, Winifred wasted no time. William, can you watch the front for an hour? I need to check something in Pa's office. Her brother nodded knowingly. Take all the time you need. I'll warn you if he returns early. Thomas Barnes's office was meticulously organized, a reflection of the man himself. Ledgers were arranged chronologically on shelves, correspondence filed by sender in a large cabinet behind his desk. Winifred went directly to the drawer labeled T and extracted the thick folder containing all communications with Edgar Thornton. The earliest letters dated back nearly a year longer than Winifred had realized her father had been corresponding with the cattle baron. She began reading chronologically, noting the gradually changing tone from formal business discussions to more personal matters. June 17, 1875. Mr. Barnes, I've observed your daughter at several social functions and find her to be a young woman of exceptional quality and breeding. Should you ever consider a matrimonial alliance for her, I would be most interested in discussing terms. August 3, 1875. Regarding your financial difficulties, perhaps we could come to an arrangement that would be mutually beneficial. I'm always looking to expand my family connections in the territory. October 12, 1875. I've taken the liberty of purchasing your notes from the Coulter's Creek Bank. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. We can discuss repayment terms at your convenience, though I believe my previous suggestion regarding your daughter warrants serious consideration. The progression was clear. Edgar had deliberately positioned himself as Thomas's creditor, creating the financial pressure that would eventually force him to accept the marriage proposal. But it wasn't until Winifred reached the letters from earlier that year that she found what she was looking for. February 8, 1876. Barnes, I've received intelligence from the highest authority that significant transportation improvements will soon be announced for the territory. Properties along certain routes will increase dramatically in value. The Jenkins Ranch, adjacent to your store, would be a particularly astute acquisition. I suggest you move quickly to secure it, by whatever means necessary. Should you succeed, I would consider including it in our discussed arrangement involving your daughter. This was followed by a hastily scrawled note dated just 2 weeks ago. TB. Governor confirms route, station at Jenkins Creek Crossing. Acquisition imperative before announcement. Will accept marriage terms as discussed if property secured. Bring papers when you come. E.T. Winifred's hands trembled as she read the note again. Here was the proof they needed: explicit confirmation that Edgar had insider information about the railroad and was using the marriage as a means to secure valuable property before the announcement. She quickly copied both letters, careful to maintain the exact wording, and returned the originals to their folder. As she was closing the drawer, her eye caught another file labeled simply Moore. Curious, she pulled it out. It wasn't much, but it established a prior connection that might prove useful. Winifred replaced the file and quietly left the office, the copied letters tucked securely in her pocket. William gave her a questioning look as she emerged. Find what you needed. Yes, she confirmed quietly. More than I expected. The rest of the day passed in agonizing slowness. Winifred attended to customers, unpacked the shipment of wedding supplies, and endured visits from well-meaning townswomen offering advice for her impending nuptials. All the while, the letters burned in her pocket, and her mind raced with possibilities and fears. What if Edgar refused to be blackmailed? What if he retaliated against her father? What if this plan failed and she found herself married to a man now doubly resentful? By evening, her nerves were stretched to breaking point. During dinner, Thomas announced that Edgar would be arriving on the noon stage the following day, and the wedding would take place the morning after. But that's too soon, Winifred protested. The dress isn't ready, the preparations. Edgar has generously offered to bring his own minister and has arranged for everything we need, Thomas interrupted. He's even ordered a wedding feast to be prepared at the hotel. All you need to do is say I do and begin your new life as Mrs. Thornton. The finality in her father's tone silenced further objections. After dinner, Winifred pleaded exhaustion and retired to her room early, ostensibly to prepare for Edgar's arrival. In reality, she sat by the window, watching the minutes tick by until it was safe to slip out. The night was darker than the previous evening, clouds obscuring the moon and stars. Winifred made her way to the creek by memory, her heart pounding with each step. Jackson was already there, a small lantern casting a golden glow over the meeting place. "Did you find anything?" he asked without preamble as she approached. Wordlessly, Winifred handed him the copied letters. Jackson read them by the lantern light, his expression hardening. "This is it," he said finally, looking up. "Clear evidence of insider trading." The governor would be furious, and so would the railroad executives. Will it be enough to make Edgar back down? Jackson carefully folded the papers. It should be. Men like Thornton value their reputation and connections above all else. The threat of exposure could cost him far more than just the Jenkins ranch. "He arrives tomorrow," Winifred said anxiously. "The wedding is set for the following morning, then we need to act quickly." Jackson's expression was resolute. "I'll confront him as soon as he arrives, before he has a chance to see you or finalize anything with your father." "No," Winifred shook her head. "We should confront him together. I want to see his face when he realizes his scheme has failed." "It's too dangerous," Jackson protested. "If he reacts badly, this is my life, Jackson, my future. I deserve to be there." He studied her determined expression and finally nodded. "All right, we'll do it together. When the stage arrives at noon, meet me behind the hotel. We'll intercept Thornton before he reaches your father. And if he refuses our terms, then we move to Plan B." Jackson stepped closer, taking both her hands in his. "Winifred, I know this is happening fast and you barely know me, but I need you to understand something." She looked up at him, the lantern light catching the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "What? I came to Coulter's Creek for a ranch, but I found something far more valuable." His voice lowered, rough with emotion. "I know it sounds mad, but from the moment I saw you standing on that porch, something changed. I can't explain it, but I know with absolute certainty that I don't want to leave this town without you." Winifred's breath caught in her throat. Part of her wanted to dismiss his words as romantic nonsense, the kind of declaration men made in the heat of conspiracy and adventure. But the intensity in his eyes spoke of something deeper, something that resonated with the strange certainty growing in her own heart. "Jackson, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "Just know that whatever happens tomorrow, whether our plan works or not, you have choices. You have a future that doesn't include Edgar Thornton if you don't want it to." Impulsively, Winifred leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but electric, sending waves of warmth through her body. When she pulled back, Jackson looked stunned. "That was a promise," she finished for him. "A promise that whatever happens tomorrow, I'm choosing my own path from now on." With those words hanging between them, she turned and hurried back toward town, her mind made up and her heart lighter than it had been in months. The stage from Helena was known for its punctuality, arriving at precisely noon each Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Today, however, it was running ahead of schedule, rolling into Coulter's Creek at 11:30. Winifred, who had been watching anxiously from the mercantile window, barely had time to signal to William before hurrying out the back door. "Stall Pa if he comes looking for me," she instructed her brother. "Tell him I went to collect flowers for Edgar's arrival or something." William nodded, his young face solemn. "Be careful, Win, and whatever you decide, I'm with you." She squeezed his hand gratefully before slipping away, making her way through the back alleys to avoid being seen. Jackson was waiting as promised, his expression tense but determined. "The stage is early," she said breathlessly as she reached him. "I know, Thornton's already inside, getting settled in the hotel's best suite." Jackson handed her the copied letters. "Keep these with you. I have my own copies, but it's better to have backups. What's our approach?" "Direct but respectful," Jackson advised. "We're not making accusations, just presenting facts and offering him a choice. Let me do most of the talking at first." Winifred took a steadying breath. "All right, let's do this." They entered the hotel through the side entrance, avoiding the lobby where they might be seen. The second floor held the establishment's finest accommodations, and it wasn't difficult to determine which one belonged to Edgar Thornton. A pair of cowhand-turned bodyguards stood outside the last door on the right. Jackson approached confidently, Winifred a step behind. "We need to speak with Mr. Thornton. It's a matter of some urgency." The larger of the two men looked them over dismissively. "Mr. Thornton ain't receiving visitors. He's resting before meeting his fiancée." "His fiancée is already here." Winifred stepped forward, lifting her chin. "Please inform Mr. Thornton that Winifred Barnes wishes to speak with him privately." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. One knocked on the door and entered briefly before emerging and nodding. "He'll see you, Miss Barnes, but just you." "Both of us," Jackson countered firmly. "The matter concerns us both." After another consultation, the guard reluctantly admitted them to the suite. Edgar Thornton stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. At 58, he maintained an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked dark hair and calculating eyes. He was handsome in a hard way, the lines of his face speaking of power rather than kindness. "Winifred," he greeted, his gaze flicking dismissively over Jackson before returning to her. "I hadn't expected you until the formal dinner tonight, and who is your companion?" "Jackson Moore," Jackson introduced himself, standing straight and meeting Thornton's eye without flinching. "I believe you're familiar with my name in connection with the Jenkins Ranch." Edgar's expression cooled. "Ah, yes, the drifter who thought he could outbid me. I admire persistence, Mr. Moore, but you're interrupting a private reunion." "This isn't a social call," Winifred said, finding her voice. "We're here to discuss a business proposition." Edgar raised an eyebrow, amused. "Business? My dear, you should leave such matters to the men. Why don't you run along and prepare for our wedding? I hear the dress arrived this morning." "I'm not going anywhere," Winifred stated firmly, "and there won't be a wedding unless you agree to our terms." That got his attention. Edgar set down his glass and approached them, his amusement fading to irritation. "What game is this? Your father assured me everything was arranged." "It was," she acknowledged, "but circumstances have changed." Jackson stepped forward, producing his copy of the incriminating letters. "We've discovered some interesting correspondence regarding the Northern Pacific Railroad extension and your advanced knowledge of the route." Edgar's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Winifred withdrew her copies. "These letters suggest otherwise, as does your sudden interest in acquiring the Jenkins Ranch, which happens to sit precisely where the new station will be built. You've been using insider information from the governor to acquire properties along the railroad route," Jackson continued. "That's illegal speculation, Mr. Thornton, the kind that could ruin your standing with both the territorial government and the railroad company." Edgar's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're playing a dangerous game. Those are serious accusations." "Not accusations," Winifred corrected. "Facts." "Facts we're prepared to share with the proper authorities unless you agree to our terms." "And what might those be?" Edgar's voice was soft, but with an underlying edge that sent a chill down Winifred's spine. Jackson laid it out clearly. "First, you'll release Thomas Barnes from all debts owed to you. Second, you'll relinquish any claim to the Jenkins Ranch and facilitate its transfer to me at the originally agreed price. And third, you'll announce publicly that the engagement has been called off due to irreconcilable differences. And in return," These letters remain private, Winifred said. Your arrangement with the governor stays secret and your reputation remains intact. Edgar was silent for a long moment, studying them both with cold calculation. Finally, he walked to the sideboard and poured another drink, his back to them. You realize, of course, that I could simply have you both eliminated, he said conversationally. Accidents happen frequently in these parts, a robbery gone wrong, a riding mishap. Jackson tensed beside her, but Winifred stood her ground. You could, she agreed, but we've taken precautions. Copies of these letters have been placed with trusted individuals to be delivered to the territorial marshal and newspaper editors in Helena should anything happen to either of us. It was a bluff, but delivered with such conviction that Edgar paused, glass halfway to his lips. You've thought this through, he acknowledged, turning to face them. I underestimated you, Winifred. Perhaps you would have made a suitable wife after all. I'm not interested in being anyone's wife right now, she replied. Especially not someone who sees me as just another acquisition. Edgar's gaze shifted to Jackson. And you, Moore, what's your stake in this? The ranch alone doesn't explain this level of involvement. Jackson's expression remained steady. Let's just say I have a vested interest in Miss Barnes's happiness. A knowing smile spread across Edgar's face. I see, well, it seems I've been outmaneuvered on multiple fronts. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Very well. I accept your terms with one condition of my own. Which is, Winifred asked cautiously, you'll both leave the territory. I don't want to see either of your faces in Montana again. My business interests here are extensive, and I won't risk running into you or wondering when these letters might resurface. Winifred glanced at Jackson, who gave a slight nod. We can agree to that, she said, provided you put everything in writing. Formal releases of debt, transfer of property, all of it legally binding. Have your father's lawyer draw up the papers. I'll sign them tomorrow morning. Edgar drained his glass. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to compose a letter to your father explaining our mutual decision to end the engagement. One more thing, Jackson added. Any retaliation against Thomas Barnes or his son will void our agreement. They stay in business undisturbed by you or your associates. Edgar's smile didn't reach his eyes. Understood, now get out. They left the hotel room in silence, neither speaking until they reached the relative privacy of the alley behind the building. Did that really just work? Winifred asked incredulously. Jackson's serious expression broke into a grin. I think it did. He knows when he's beaten and he values his political connections too much to risk exposure. So what happens now? Now we tell your father the truth, or at least part of it. Jackson took her hand, squeezing it gently. Are you ready? Winifred nodded, though her stomach knotted with anxiety. As ready as I'll ever be. Thomas Barnes's reaction to Edgar Thornton's letter was exactly as explosive as Winifred had anticipated. He stormed around the Mercantile's back office, face purple with rage. This is outrageous. After all the arrangements, all the preparations, he simply changes his mind, claims you're unsuited in temperament. What did you say to him, Winifred? What did you do? Nothing, Pa, she answered, maintaining the story they'd agreed upon. We simply had a frank conversation about expectations and realized we want different things. Different things? The man is wealthy beyond measure. He was offering a security and position. At what cost? Winifred challenged. A lifetime of unhappiness. Being wife number 3 to a man who sees me as property. Thomas deflated slightly, collapsing into his chair. The debts, Winifred, without this marriage we'll lose everything, the store, our home. Actually, that's been resolved as well, she said carefully. Edgar has agreed to forgive the debts as a gesture of goodwill. Her father looked up sharply. What? Why would he do that? Perhaps he has more honor than we gave him credit for, Jackson suggested from where he stood by the door. He had insisted on being present for this conversation, though Thomas had objected to his inclusion. And you, Thomas turned his frustration toward Jackson. What's your role in all this? Why are you even here? Pa, there's something else you should know. Winifred took a deep breath. Mr. Moore and I have come to an arrangement of our own. Thomas's eyes widened. What kind of arrangement? A business partnership initially, she explained. Mr. Moore still wishes to purchase the Jenkins Ranch, and I've agreed to help him establish it as a working cattle operation. And why would you do that? You know nothing about cattle. I know about business, Winifred countered. About accounts and supply management, skills that would be valuable to any operation. Thomas looked between them suspiciously. There's more to this, isn't there? Jackson stepped forward. Mr. Barnes, I've developed feelings for your daughter. Genuine feelings based on admiration for her intelligence and strength of character. I'm not proposing marriage, not yet. That would be premature. But I am asking your blessing to court her properly with honorable intentions. The bluntness of the declaration left Thomas momentarily speechless. He looked to Winifred, who met his gaze steadily. Is this what you want? He finally asked. To throw away a secure future with Thornton for what? The uncertain prospects of a cattle driver. Jackson has saved for years to buy his own ranch, Winifred defended. He's respected throughout the territory for his honesty and work ethic, and yes, this is what I want, the chance to choose my own path, my own partner. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, the fight gradually leaving him. Your mother always said you had her spirit, he finally murmured. Stubborn as a mule and twice as determined, she'd probably approve of your standing up for yourself, even if I don't. Winifred moved to kneel beside her father's chair, taking his weathered hand in hers. Pa, I'm not abandoning you or William, but I need to build my own life, make my own choices. Can you understand that? After what seemed an eternity, Thomas nodded. I suppose I must. He looked up at Jackson, his expression stern. If you harm her or fail to provide adequately, you have my word, sir, Jackson interrupted. I'll spend my life ensuring she never regrets her choice. The next morning, Edgar Thornton signed the papers releasing Thomas Barnes from all debts and transferring the Jenkins Ranch to Jackson Moore at the originally agreed price. By noon, he was on the stage back to Helena, his brief, uncomfortable visit to Coulter's Creek concluded. The town buzzed with gossip about the broken engagement, with theories ranging from the plausible to the absurd. Winifred endured the curious stares and whispered comments with her head held high, secure in the knowledge that she had chosen her own fate. 1 week later, with the legal transfers complete and the ranch officially his, Jackson found Winifred at their spot by the creek. The summer evening was warm, fireflies beginning to dance among the willows as twilight descended. It's really happened, he said, settling beside her on the bank. The ranch is mine, our plan worked. Did you doubt it would? She asked, smiling. I doubted everything except you, he admitted, taking her hand. Your courage, your determination, they amazed me from the start. Winifred leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she hadn't been in years. So what happens now? You mentioned Wyoming territory when we first discussed running away. Jackson nodded. I did. I have friends there, good land available. We'd be welcome. And Thornton's condition that we leave Montana, probably wise to honor it at least for a few years. He's not a man who forgives easily. Winifred considered this. What about my family? William was counting on attending university in Helena next year. He still can, Jackson assured her. We'll make sure of it, and your father, well, with his debts cleared, the store should prosper again. They can visit us, or we can meet them in Idaho territory if needed. You've thought of everything, she observed. I try to. He shifted to face her, his expression serious. Winifred, I know we agreed to take things slowly to give you time to be sure. But these past days have only deepened my feelings for you. I don't want to leave for Wyoming without knowing. Knowing what? She prompted when he hesitated. Jackson took both her hands in his. Knowing that someday when you're ready, you might consider becoming my wife. Not because it's arranged or convenient, but because you choose it, because you feel for me what I feel for you. Winifred looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and hope there. A week ago, she had been resigned to a loveless marriage of convenience. Now she faced a future bright with possibilities, with a man who valued her mind as much as her hand. I don't need someday, she said softly. When we leave for Wyoming, I want to go as your wife. The joy that transformed Jackson's face was answer enough, But he pulled her close and sealed the promise with a kiss that spoke of all the tomorrows stretching before them, tomorrows they would face together, by choice rather than arrangement. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Winifred Barnes became Winifred Moore in a simple ceremony at the Jenkins Ranch. Thomas gave his daughter away with reluctant pride, while William beamed from his place as Jackson's best man. The ranch house, though still modest, had been prepared for their brief honeymoon before the journey to Wyoming Territory. As the small gathering of friends shared a celebratory meal, Jackson pulled his new wife aside to the porch, where they could see the rolling hills of what had nearly been her prison, but was now their stepping stone to freedom. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. Winifred nodded, leaning into his embrace. "More than I ever thought possible. No regrets about leaving, none," she assured him. "Though I will miss this place, it holds memories now." Jackson smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We'll make new ones, better ones." "Is that another offer, Mr. Moore?" she teased. "The best one I have," he replied. "A lifetime of choosing each other every day." Winifred turned in his arms, rising on tiptoes to kiss him properly. "I accept." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting golden light across the land that had almost cost Winifred her freedom, she reflected on how quickly life could change. 2 months ago, she had stood on her father's porch, a telegram in hand, resigned to a future not of her choosing. Now she stood on her own porch, beside a man who had taught her that arrangements could be undone, that better offers could be made, and that the most valuable choice was the freedom to make one's own path. Together, they watched the light fade, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead in Wyoming Territory, they would face them as they had faced Edgar Thornton, with courage, determination, and an unwavering belief in each other. 5 years later, Winifred stood on the porch of their Wyoming ranch house, watching Jackson teach their 3-year-old daughter Jenny to ride her first pony. The small but prosperous cattle operation had flourished under their joint management, Winifred's business acumen complementing Jackson's practical ranching knowledge. William had completed his studies, and now practiced law in Cheyenne, occasionally representing the ranch in business matters. Thomas had visited twice, grudgingly acknowledging that his daughter had indeed made the right choice. The railroad had come through Montana Territory as predicted, turning the Jenkins Ranch into valuable property that they had sold at a significant profit before departing. As for Edgar Thornton, they had heard he'd eventually married a banker's widow from Helena, only to lose much of his fortune in a failed mining venture. The man who had once threatened their happiness was now merely a distant memory, a reminder of how close Winifred had come to a very different life. "Mama, look," Jenny called, her face alight with excitement as she balanced confidently on the gentle pony. "I'm riding by myself." "I see you, darling," Winifred called back, her heart swelling with pride and love. Jackson secured the lead rope to the pony and jogged over to join his wife on the porch. "She's a natural," he said, slipping an arm around Winifred's waist, "just like her mother, fearless and determined." "She gets plenty from her father, too," Winifred observed, leaning into his embrace. "That stubborn chin, for one thing." Jackson laughed, the sound still as warming to her heart as it had been the first time she'd heard it. "Speaking of stubborn, have you told her yet?" Winifred placed a hand on her abdomen, where the first subtle signs of their second child were beginning to show. "Not yet. I thought we could tell her together tonight." "Another more to help run this empire we're building," Jackson mused, his expression softening as he covered her hand with his own. "I never imagined having all this when I rode into Coulter's Creek that day." "Neither did I," Winifred admitted. "I was so certain my future was set in stone." Jackson turned her to face him, his eyes still holding the same intensity that had captured her attention 5 years ago. "Thank God for better offers," he murmured, bending to kiss her. Winifred smiled against his lips. "The best offer I ever accepted," she agreed, knowing with absolute certainty that the arrangement she had chosen, this life, this love, this family, was everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to dream.